One of the ones that we've got in the collection here is a cover from the magazine Viz, which depicts a beach strewn with detritus and the caption, "Skegness Is." Hello, I'm Oli Betts and welcome back to Off the Rails, and today we're in the wonderful, colourful visual world of the railway poster. Railway posters are all around us. They're in stations, they're on trains, but they're also on mugs, on souvenir cards, on pieces of art that people have in their homes, on jigsaws. And they've had this wonderful, long cultural life, and they really are part of the sort of DNA of British visual arts and visual culture. But their history goes a lot further back than you might think, right into the early days of the railways. And so what we're going to do today is look at a few key examples spread out across our huge collection. I think the best place to begin is to ask, well, what actually is a railway poster? And that seems like a really silly question, but it isn't. Right at the start of the railway age, nothing is very clear about it. How are you going to sell this new service to customers, some of whom are absolutely terrified of what the railway might be and what it might do? So what I've got here are three different visual sort of strategies that the railways came up with, but only one of these is a poster. So let's start with this one. This is what we call a notice. It's cheap, it's text heavy, it's advertising a wrestling match that you could get a special train for Haydon Bridge in 1845. And as you can sort of see, it follows that Victorian style of why use one font when you could use many, why use one size of text when you could use all of them. It has an image. A lot of them didn't have an image because they were so cheaply and quickly produced. And the main reason we would think of it as a notice is that it's there for a particular event or a particular moment. It's to give notice to something, and then it'll quickly be sort of plastered over with something else once the event has happened. This long rectangular one here from the sunny south coast and the Isle of Wight for the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway about the turn of the 20th century is what people call a carriage print. So it sits in that space between the top of the seat and the luggage rack, or if you travel on the London Underground, you can see the survivors of those long rectangular adverts that sit above the windows on an underground carriage. Carriage prints are more everyday. They can be artistic, but like this one, for example, can be very, very what we consider just advertising. This, from the 1840s, is possibly the earliest railway poster in the world, certainly the earliest one in our collection. It's for the London and Dover Railway. It's advertising that long sort of through service, get the train, it connects to the steamers that cross the Channel to France through Folkestone and Dover here. It's printed, although it's faded, which a lot of posters tend to do over time. It was originally printed in a sort of red, white and blue to mirror the sort of French flag, but it has this wonderful like roundel design here, which if you sort of come in close, you can see there's lots of very delicate images of railway carriages, railway engines, tunnels, the Channel and the Channel steamers that would take you across. So that sort of very heavy visual attempt to sell the railways is what we'd really start to see emerge as the sort of definable railway poster in the 19th century. Whilst railway companies understood the value of advertising, they were quite slow and conservative to really embrace the visual medium of the poster in the 19th century. When they did, they took a very sort of like everything is everything and more is best approach to poster design. So if you can see this one from the 1890s for Picturesque Pickering, it has every single thing and every single design flourish just in one poster. So there are 4 photographs, there is one painting, there is about 7 or 8 different fonts, there are all sorts of different sizes of fonts going on here, And there are all sorts of little weird cartouches and flourishes and embellishments all over this poster. And this is really standard for Victorian advertising. It was often very text heavy, often a real jumble of images and colours. I've not removed it from its protective sleeve, I'm afraid. And that's partly because these posters are such rare survivors and we're so lucky to have them in the museum. And you can see how thin it is here, particularly where it's taken some damage around the P for Pickering and at the top here. There are some really amazing bits to pick out. For example, in between the castle and the edge of the Yorkshire Moors, we're highlighting the unrivalled water supply that Pickering has as the gateway to the Yorkshire Moors. We've got tennis courts, golf links, excellent fishing, brackets, trout and grayling, Roman camps, ancient castle, everything that you could want in Pickering. The district embraces some of the finest and most romantic scenery in England. Further down, we've got the mention of the company itself and actually how you get to Pickering and how you get the train there. And blink and you'll miss it, there's a tiny little bit just here. Illustrated Handbook of Information supplied free on application to J.A. Sorden, Marketplace, Pickering. One of the things that you start to see emerge is, although this poster for, like, I think particularly a modern audience is like almost overwhelming level of detail and colour, there are some sort of flourishes that are going to continue well into the sort of present day. And one of them is this advertising of extra material that can be gathered up for the trip. The idea of writing to either the railway company or the place being advertised and asking for an illustrated guide that you would be sent, which would show you hotels and businesses and places to stay and restaurants and other opportunities as a tourist, really started in the late 19th century and will become and remains, I think, a mainstay of posters. I mean, now we're more used to like QR codes and website addresses on posters, but this is where it starts. Whilst definitely eye-catching in good and bad ways, that confusing jumble of the Victorian poster couldn't last forever. And there are sort of three figures who are really, really important in establishing the modern railway poster as we would understand. And the one that I think when you say railway poster, most people have in mind of that beautiful big vista with sort of limited text on it. And one of those is Norman Wilkinson. Wilkinson's a famous artist, he's a Royal Academician, he's very, very into sea and naval paintings particularly, but he's quite easily tempted by the sort of commercial opportunity of railway work. And in the 1900s, the London and North Western Railway are looking for someone to advertise their new ferry service to Ireland. And Wilkinson decides to do this if he can do away with the jumble of the railway poster before, as he said, with all of those tiny little images in boxes and unnecessary flourishes and all sorts of fonts. What he says he wants with the image is simplicity and truth, and that's what you get into Ireland. You get one enormous vista of the Irish Sea with the railway ferry in the middle of it. Apart from the company name and to Ireland, that is it in terms of text, apart from Wilkinson's name and the printer's credit down here. This is 1905 and To Ireland causes quite a stir when it comes out, particularly if you believe Wilkinson's memoir, because Wilkinson was never shy about discussing his importance in the development of visual arts in Britain. There are two other figures who are really, really important in developing the modern poster as well, though. One of them is Frank Pick, who at the same time as Wilkinson is working on what we would now call London Transport, London Underground. Frank Pick's hugely important in developing that sort of clarity of style that we associate with London Underground. So he commissions a new railway alphabet for the Underground. He's heavily involved in the sort of design of visual sort of colour schemes, as well as commissioning artists for posters. And that ripple out from sort of the London-based underground railways in terms of design really takes all of the other railway companies by surprise and starts them in a sort of competitive mode. The other one is a friend who's not an artist at all, but is a fictional character, is our lovely friend the Jolly Fisherman. Possibly one of the most iconic poster images of the early 20th century, and one that people still recognise today. This is a postcard of it. It's not the original poster, of course, but John Hassell's poster, when it comes out, causes quite a sensation as well. And again, you've got that sort of, like, it's a lot funner than To Ireland, but you've got those same principles of the centre stage, the clarity of image. All of this text here is added later for the poster. You just get the railway company and this slogan, which had already been used before, Skegness Is so bracing. The original poster was then adopted and adapted by various artists in the 20s and 30s who added other characters or put the fishermen in other settings, but that clear aesthetic of this jolly, rotund man galloping along the beach has sort of galloped his way into the hearts and minds of like British illustrators. So he's a frequent figure in like political cartoons or illustrations. One of the ones that we've got in the collection here is a cover from the magazine Viz, which depicts a beach strewn with detritus and the caption Skegness Is paid for, as the caption says at the bottom, by a rival town council. So between Frank Pick, Norman Wilkinson and John Hassell's Jolly Fisherman, you've got this sort of trifecta of clear and sort of very, very deliberate, colourful design that starts to set the trend in the 1900s for the next couple of decades of railway posters that people are really familiar with. Bright colours, big block prints, small captions. We've very clearly arrived in the sort of golden era of the railway posters, which is the 20s and 30s. Arguably through to the 1950s as well, but people don't think about that quite so much. One of the things that people think about a lot is that railway posters seem to be this sort of quintessentially British art form. I mean, that's not true at all. They're often seen as quintessentially British because they depict very, very British things. I mean, this one by Frida Lungstrom, who then had a much later career in British radio and television on programmes like Watch with Mother and Listen with Mother, features Tintern Abbey. But there were lots of artists working in a European context who were depicting exactly the same sort of historic or tourist locations and lots of similar styles of image. A lot of it's coming actually from very European art styles. So the coloured lithography of people like Toulouse-Lautrec, that's sort of starting in the sort of end of the 19th, early 20th century, really filters into sort of interwar Britain and really shapes how people think about colour. And also this is an exciting time post the First World War where colour is being used in all sorts of ways to sort of break up often still very soot-stained and smoggy cities particularly. So selling audiences on like an incredibly vibrant atmosphere to go to. So this one for Great Western Railway is Tintern Abbey. The next one we have here is very, very familiar to a lot of people, I think. The Southern Railway by the 20s and 30s, as I'm sure Thomas and others have told you, has become very, very focused on the tourist trade and particularly the sort of southern holiday ports. And this sort of coloured photography, which is quite an old-fashioned style actually, it's a very Victorian thing, colouring a photograph, has this sort of like relationship between the driver and the tiny child with the tiny suitcase about to embark on holiday and the childish writing, which again like is a staple of posters often featuring children now, but is quite an early innovation here. I'm taking an early holiday because I know summer comes soonest in the south. At various points in the sort of 20s and 30s, Southern Railway would develop a character called Sunshine Sam, or Southern Sam, depending on who you ask, who was a sort of jolly-faced, middle-aged railway employee of the Southern who was meant to be sort of your guide and gateway into sunshine holidays in the south. And holidays at the time are heavily associated with health as well. The idea that the sun and the sea are sort of remedial for people is really important in the 20s and 30s. Interwar posters are dominated by big block colours, really bright themes, and a very, very clear sense of who is being advertised and what is on sale. So you've got this beautiful vision of the North Berwick coastline looking sunnier and more acclimatised than ever, perhaps in reality, by Frank Newbould, with these sort of ranging of everything. And just look at the colours. So you've got this bold blue across the top, not a cloud, not an extraneous detail in the sky, mirroring exactly the blue of the swimming lady's costume here. You've got the big grey figure of the golfer reclining after a round of golf. You've got another figure playing golf in the background there, and the grey of the clubs in the foreground here. And then behind you've got this bright yellow, almost sort of set against the softer yellow of the sand, of this lady who arguably could be in a hiking attire or something like that. And it's just to do all these different visual coded elements that are hammering home all the different activities you could do on a holiday to North Berwick, and tagged off, of course, with an illustrated booklet from the town clerk or any LNER agency, which would have had the same bright colours, the same clarity of image that Newbould's poster has. So that, I hope, has given you a bit of an overview of the early century of British railway posters, from the beginning of the railway age through to the sort of bright, bold colours of the interwar period. I hope you've enjoyed exploring this part of the poster collection with us. If you're really interested in knowing more about our poster collection, please come and visit the museum, or leave us a comment down below and tell us what you'd like us to do more videos on. Thank you for watching this episode of Off the Rails. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and keep watching for other videos.